changes that you want to make to any one of those bullet points up there?
I would add one, or see if it fits in the first bullet point maybe, around protecting the choices and decisions of parents and guardians over their students. Back when we were first elected, we went through a couple of bills in the State House on, requiring vaccinations and, usurping parent rights and their choice for other things in that regard, and then creating a separate system where they logged you in and basically forced you into, taking this class to say, oh, this is why you should vaccinate. And there just was a whole big mess of, government overreach into parents' choices on their children. So if it's, something in there that just says, supporting legislation that encourages effective family-school partnerships and protects the parent or guardian's right to raise their child in certain decision-making, I don't know. But it's just, there were bills last year on stuff that, added other things that affect minors without parents, notification there. So we've seen legislation being passed that does not include parents in the decision-making process. If it's mental health issues, if it's, different, sexual orientation stuff, counseling, there's just things that are not supporting parents in the space. And if we could have something in there about that, I would appreciate it.
Thoughts or feedback from the rest of the board?
I would argue that vaccinations and what we do as a board, those aren't necessarily connected. So we are interested in the family school partnership about education and parent rights for, we shouldn't be spending our precious lobbying dollars, is partly what it comes down to, arguing for or against vaccination.
And that was one example. It was more of just of keeping a choice of a parent to say, this is what you want to do, and that's the end of it. Versus, oh, well, if that's what you want to do, you've got to go do these other classes and sign up for this system and run your documents through here, and then that's what you report to the schools. It was just an extra hoop for people saying, this is a choice for my family.
You're saying keep the government out of the family unit.
Yes, and as it relates to, now you've got to go through this system, and that's the paper you turn into the schools to say, I'm doing an alternative vaccine schedule, or I'm choosing this religious exemption, but I had to hop through this state hoop because of this bill that got passed. So somewhere in the way of, I'm not saying, hey, we're not nitpicking issues, but it's saying, if you're making legislation that's causing it harder for parents to raise their kids that then go to public schools, we should be protecting and trying to advocate for parents to say, they're the first teacher of these kids. They're delegating their responsibility to us in the school system, and we should honor that responsibility that they get. That's more of, if that helps clarify maybe.
Would it be fair to, you can let me know if this is a fair summary of both of your positions or not. Would it be fair to try to summarize this as, we don't want the legislator, we don't want any of this stuff routed through public schools? That we don't want expectations levied on the public school system, that we be the one to mediate these kinds of decisions?
I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it. And that kind of goes to the unfunded mandates piece where, now we've got school nurses figuring out how to run through this whole extra system of immunization records and waivers and all that. So that's one example, a recent example. So.
I just don't see it as part of what we should be lobbying on, that's all. So I just disagree on that.
Okay. Is there any specific language itself that you can propose, Jason or Thomas, you also trying to bridge the gap between what Director Hart looks at it, or
I think at the end of the bullet point, while honoring a parent's or guardian's right to raise their student how they deem fit, with limited government interference, something like that.
Yeah, I think policy AKB, that parent partnership policy that the board adopted, has language, some of the language already in there. I'm just looking at that policy right now. It says the board values the parent guardian as the constant and primary influence in a child's life and recognizes that parents are responsible for determining the upbringing, education, care, and moral development of their child.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe throw that in there.
Yeah.
Throw that whole point in there.
Well, I don't know we need to throw the whole of it. We can say supports legislation that encourages effective family-school partnership and recognizes parents as an integral part of the education and moral development of their child or something like that.
Sure.
Is that something that the board, we can, if you can look at the language in AKB, okay, and see if you can pull something in there. I think this is
In which one, KP?
AKB. AKB, that was the parent partnership policy that the board adopted last year. Something that would reflect in that it would essentially come to the board after that the board would have to adopt this from the board dais. So if you can put that language in there and before it gets posted on the board docs, before board can adopt it, okay?
I'll just note one more thing, and that is, when we look at our Board of Education priorities, I understand that there's a strong interest in parent rights, and I think we also have to recognize that some people will keep government and school districts and teachers out of their kids' lives because they don't want to be reported for abuse and not feed their kids or crazy things. But when I look at our Board of Education priorities, I think this should be reflective of that and the change, the positive change we want to see. And to me, that the vaccination thing, I understand that's just one example, but how does it come back and support our student achievement, our enrollment, and our resources? So we've got improving schools and student achievement. Parents should be an integral part of their students' education. Yes, but that, to me, that's summarized by effective family-school partnerships. School district resources. We talk about, not a little further down, the unfunded mandates, which you could argue is part of resources. We don't, it's just not part of our sphere in a way that is separate to me. So that's why I'm arguing so strongly. It's like, I think we can leave it out because we are about the education, and I don't think we should lose sight of that in our priorities. So, I
Okay.
my case.
Has the board got any, I'm just trying to figure out a consensus here from the board. Director Jurgensen articulated one line of thought, Director Hart articulated another line. Is the board at this point in time want to take any stance on this, or do we leave it as it is right now? Where do the board land on it?
I'd like to go back and give some thought to the language in AKB. Not only on this board, but the previous board when I was attending. We seem to be speaking the same language, and that is a restriction on unfunded mandates that come down to school boards. And that we recognize that we as a board recognize that, again, that's been said around this table, that parents are the first teachers and we have children only for this amount of time, and hopefully parents will have their children for the rest of their lives, and I think we need to acknowledge that. And so I would like more time to go back to AKB and see if recognize is a strong enough word for the
So this has to be,
what I have.
perfect. This has to be adopted by the board from the board dais. Director Jurgensen, if you can pull some language from AKB to reflect your line of thought, it is just a proposal that you are bringing in front of the board. And the board at that point in time can decide if we want to adopt the revision that Director Jurgensen is bringing to the table. Instead of us trying to wordsmith out here, let Director Jurgensen bring that to the table and we can say, hey, A or nay, we will adopt it without that language revision. Is that good?
Sure.
And we leave it at that. Okay. Supports legislation that provides for increased teacher quality and effectiveness. I don't have any change to that.